Be me. Sienna. A few years ago, I was basically a goddess, 28 years old, running my own online brand, living in a downtown high-rise that cost more per month than most people make in a year. My whole thing was female empowerment, but a specific, very profitable brand of it. I wasn't teaching women how to code or start a business. I was teaching them how to leverage their value in the dating market. My core philosophy, the one that made me famous, was simple. Don't date a man who doesn't make six figures. Period. I called it dating with standards. My followers called it the gospel. I had catchphrases. If he can't afford a steak dinner, he can't afford your time. A man's wallet is a reflection of his ambition and his ability to provide. Don't settle for a beta's budget. It was brilliant. It tapped right into the frustrations of modern dating. Women felt like they were taking back control. My live streams would get tens of thousands of viewers. I'd sit in my perfectly lit home office, a glass of expensive wine in hand, and dispense my wisdom. I felt powerful, intouchable. I genuinely believed I was helping women avoid the trap of ending up with some dead-end guy who would drag them down. The incident that really launched me into the stratosphere happened on one of those streams. I was doing a Q&A, batting away the usual questions. What if he's sweet but broke? Next, my boyfriend is an artist. Should I leave him? Yesterday, then a comment popped up in the chat from some guy. Zeph. It wasn't even aggressive. It was just a question. What about a man's character, or kindness, or shared values? Isn't that more important than his income? I saw it, and a slow, cruel smile spread across my face. This was a perfect teaching moment. I told my moderators not to ban him. Let's use this as a case study. Ladies, I announced to my audience. I clicked on his profile. It was public. A goldmine of mediocrity. I shared my screen so everyone could see. His profile picture was him on a hiking trail, grinning. A goofy-looking dog at his feet. He worked in IT for some mid-level company. His photos were a catalog of everything I preached against. Camping trips with friends. A picture of him proudly standing next to a very normal, slightly used sedan. A photo of him and his dad fixing a fence. All right. Class. Let's break this down, I said, my voice dripping with condescension. Here we have a prime example of what I call a comfort zone man. He offers kindness. I said, making air quotes. Kindness doesn't pay for a mortgage on a nice house. Does it? He offers shared values. I see a picture of him changing a tire. I guess the shared value is manual labor. The chat was flying. Women were posting laughing emojis, calling him a brokey, a low-value male. I dissected every part of his life. Look at this. Ladies, this is the man who will promise you a lifetime of happiness, but can only deliver a weekend trip to a national park. He's not a bad person. I conceded, as if I were being generous. He's just insignificant. He has no ambition. His ceiling is a senior analyst position and a pension plan. This is the man who will ask you to split the bill on your anniversary. This is the man who thinks a romantic evening is Netflix and a pizza he got a coupon for. I talked about how men like him, who question women's standards, are engaging in a form of toxic masculinity. They try to guilt-trip you into lowering your expectations because they can't compete. It was a masterclass in public humiliation. The guy, Zeph, never wrote another word. He just disappeared from the chat. But the clip of me exposing the low-value male mindset went viral. My follower count doubled in a week. I got a book deal. Sponsorships from luxury brands came pouring in. I was on top of the world. The undisputed queen of dating advice. I truly believed I was invincible. My friends were a mixed bag. A couple of them were my disciples, hanging on my every word. Others were more traditional. My oldest friend, for example, was a nurse. She was dating a high school history teacher. I remember having brunch with her shortly after my viral moment. I was trying to convince her to leave him. You're a beautiful, intelligent woman. I told her, you could have anyone. Why are you settling for a guy who probably makes less than you do? She just smiled this quiet, infuriating smile. She said he made her happy, that he was kind and supportive, and made her laugh. Happiness doesn't pay for nice vacations. I shot back, kindness doesn't get you a better life. I was so sure of myself. I genuinely pitied her. A few months later, she got engaged. I went to her bachelorette party. It was a weekend at a cabin, not a lavish trip to Vegas like I'd suggested. All her friends were normal people. Teachers, social workers, office managers. They talked about their fiancés, their plans for the future, buying small houses, planning affordable weddings. I felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign tribe. I spent most of the weekend on my phone, checking my follower count and responding to comments. At her wedding, I wore a dress that cost more than their catering budget. I watched her stand the altar with her teacher, husband, and they both had tears in their eyes. They looked so genuinely in love. I felt a tiny, unfamiliar pang in my chest. I told myself it was just secondhand sentimentality. I posted a picture of myself at the wedding with a caption, "Celebrating love. But always remember to know your worth." Ladies. It got thousands of likes. Then my 30th birthday arrived. It hit me harder than I expected. I was successful, rich, and famous in my niche, but I was also completely alone. All my dates were with men who fit my six-figure criteria, but they were mostly for networking or just casual fun. I hadn't been in a real committed relationship in years. I looked at my life, the perfect apartment, the designer wardrobe, the successful business. It was time for the final piece of the puzzle. It was time to find my own high-value man. A husband. I wasn't worried. I was the expert. After all, I knew the rules. I wrote the book. Literally, finding a rich, successful, and handsome man to marry would be my next big project. I created a spreadsheet. I reactivated my profile on the most exclusive dating apps. My bio was simple. CEO of my own brand. Looking for an equal partner in ambition and success. The likes started pouring in. Bankers. Tech entrepreneurs. Surgeons. Lawyers. It was a target-rich environment. I thought, this is going to be easy. I had no idea what was coming. I had no idea that the queen of high standards, was about to enter a game I couldn't win. The hunt began with a man who was, on paper, perfect. He was a crypto millionaire. Young, flashy, confident. He picked me up in a car that looked like a spaceship. We went to a restaurant so exclusive you couldn't even find it on a map. I was ready to be impressed. I was ready to meet my match. But the entire dinner was a monologue about the blockchain. He talked about his portfolio, his NFTs, his market predictions. He didn't ask me a single question about myself that wasn't related to my brand's revenue. At one point, I tried to steer the conversation to something more personal. I asked him about his family. He waved his hand dismissively and said, "They didn't get it at first, but now they do," and then showed me the balance in his crypto wallet on his phone. It felt less like a date and more like an investor pitch. I realized he wasn't looking at me as a potential partner. He was looking at me as an asset, a high-value female to add to his collection of other high-value things. The Sienna, the empowerment coach brand, was attractive to him. Sienna. The person was irrelevant. We never went out again. I told my followers it was because his emotional intelligence didn't match his financial portfolio. They loved it. Privately, I was a little shaken. The next one was an heir to an old money family. He was the complete opposite of the crypto bro. He had impeccable manners, was classically handsome, and spoke 3 languages. He took me to the opera. He knew about art and history. This, I thought, was more like it. This was class. This was legacy. On our third date, he started talking about the future. His future. He talked about the importance of his family's name. He explained that his wife would naturally have to step back from her career. The family is a full-time job. He said, smiling politely, managing the households, overseeing the children's education, organizing the social calendar. I just stared at him. My career is my life. I said, I built it from nothing. He patted my hand, and that's very admirable. A wonderful hobby, but your primary role would be as my wife and the mother of my children. The irony was suffocating. My entire brand was built on female independence and power, and here was a high-value man telling me my life's work was just a cute hobby to be discarded once I had a ring on my finger. He wasn't looking for a partner. He was hiring for a position. I ended it. Feeling a weird mix of anger and confusion, I had told my followers for years that these men were the prize, but up close, the prize felt like a trap. I kept going. I was convinced these were just a couple of bad apples. I dated a surgeon. He was brilliant, dedicated, and a hero in his field. He was also on call 90% of the time. Our dates were constantly canceled or cut short. The few times we were together, he was so exhausted he could barely speak. Our relationship existed entirely through text messages. I dated a lawyer who was a partner at a major firm. He was charming, vittu, and intelligent. He was also, as I found out through a friend of a friend, very much married. When I confronted him, he didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. He told me he and his wife had an understanding. He said that for men at his level, a mistress was just part of the lifestyle, like a country club membership. He actually seemed surprised that I was upset. I thought you were a modern woman. He said, I thought you understood how things work. Each date, each new man, chipped away at my confidence. These were the men that I had idolized. The top 1%, and they were all disappointing. They were selfish, or controlling, or unavailable, or dishonest. They weren't looking for an equal, they were looking for an accessory, an employee, a convenience, or a secret. Meanwhile, my other friend, the one who wasn't a nurse, also got married. She married her college boyfriend. He ran a small landscaping business, a good guy, but definitely not a six-figure earner. I went to her wedding. It was a backyard barbecue, simple, happy, and so full of genuine affection. It made my teeth ache. I was the maid of honor. I gave a speech about finding love that felt hollow and fake even as I said the words. I was now the last single one in my original friend group. I would see their posts on social media. The nurse friend posted an ultrasound photo. The other one posted pictures of the new puppy she and her husband got. They were building lives. Small, normal, happy lives. And I was going on an endless parade of disappointing dates with rich men who made me feel more alone than when I was by myself. I started to feel a creeping sense of dread. My own advice, the foundation of my entire identity, was failing me, but I couldn't admit it. Not to anyone, and especially not to myself. My brand depended on me being the woman who had it all figured out. So, I doubled down. My online content became even more aggressive. The reason you're single is because your standards are too low. I'd preach, you need to filter out the time wasters and focus only on the best. I was trying to convince myself as much as I was trying to convince my audience, but the truth was, my spreadsheet of potential husbands was getting shorter, and my heart was getting heavier. I was the queen of a kingdom I had built, but I was also its only prisoner. The next year was a slow, grinding descent. I turned 31. The desperation I was feeling started to seep into my interactions. Men, especially successful men, can smell desperation, like sharks smell blood in the water. My dates became less like interviews and more like interrogations. I'd find myself grilling them about their 5-year plans, their views on commitment, their financial statements. I was no longer the cool, confident woman in control. I was a woman on a mission, and it wasn't attractive. The quality of men I was matching with started to decline. Even within the 6-figure bracket, I was getting the recently divorced guys who wanted to relive their 20s. The entrepreneurs whose businesses were just vague ideas and a fancy website. The guys who were technically rich but had the emotional range of a teaspoon. I remember one particularly awful date with a finance guy. He spent 2 hours complaining about his ex-wife. He told me in excruciating detail how she took him to the cleaners in the divorce. "Be careful," he warned me, pointing a finger at my face. "You seem smart. But all women turn eventually. You're all just waiting for a payday." I just sat there listening to him project all his bitterness onto me. This was the man my philosophy told me was a catch. I started to notice a change in my online community. The comment sections were getting more hostile. "You give all this advice, Sienna, but where's your man? Easy to have high standards when you're alone? Maybe the problem isn't them, it's you." My view counts started to slip. My engagement numbers were down. My sponsors started sending polite but concerned emails. The brand was me. And I was failing. My loneliness became a physical thing. I'd come home to my huge, silent apartment, and the only sound would be the hum of the refrigerator. I had a closet full of beautiful clothes and nowhere to go. I had a bank account full of money and no one to share it with. I'd scroll through my phone, a sick sort of ritual. I'd see my nurse friend's posts about her pregnancy, her husband building a crib, the baby shower. I'd see my other friends' posts of her and her husband hiking with their dog. The same kind of boring life I'd once mocked. They looked happy. Genuinely. Deeply happy. I started to feel this ugly, corrosive envy. I told myself they were just putting on a show for social media. That behind the scenes, they were probably miserable, struggling with money, bored out of their minds. But I knew I was lying to myself. The breaking point with my friends came when the nurse had her baby. They invited me to the hospital. I walked into the room, and there she was, looking exhausted but glowing. Her husband was sitting next to her, holding their tiny, wrinkled baby. He looked up at me with such overwhelming, unadulterated joy on his face that it felt like a punch to the gut. I mumbled my congratulations, gave them the ridiculously expensive gift I'd bought, and made an excuse to leave after 10 minutes. I couldn't stand to be in that room. The air was thick, with a kind of love and connection that I felt completely excluded from. On the drive home, I had to pull over because I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road. It wasn't happy tears for them. It was miserable tears for me. After that, I started to pull away from them. I stopped answering their calls as often. I made excuses to miss get-togethers. It was easier to be alone than to be confronted with their happiness. My work, which had always been my salvation, was now a source of constant stress. I had to get on camera and pretend to be the confident, all-knowing guru. I had to sell a fantasy that I knew, deep down, was a lie. Every live stream felt like a performance. I felt like a fraud. The advice I was giving started to sound shrill and defensive, even to my own ears. I was running out of material. My content became repetitive. It was all just different ways of saying, men are the problem. Men don't want to commit. Men are intimidated by successful women. The good ones are all taken. I was just verbalizing my own bitter experiences and packaging it as universal truth. And my audience, what was left of it, ate it up. It validated their own frustrations. We were all in an echo chamber of disappointment together. I started drinking more. A glass of wine to get ready for a stream, another one during, a couple more afterwards to unwind. It was the only way I could numb the feeling of being a complete and utter failure. The universe, in its cruel sense of humor, decided to show me what I was missing one more time. I was in a grocery store one evening, picking up a pre-made salad and a bottle of wine, the single woman special, and I saw him, Zeph, the guy I had publicly destroyed on my live stream all those years ago. He was with a woman. She was pretty, but in a normal girl next door way, not an Instagram model. They were in the baby aisle looking at diapers. They were laughing about something, holding hands. He looked happy. He looked content. He had a wedding ring on his finger. I froze. I literally hid behind a display of paper towels. I watched them as they picked out their diapers, talked, and walked towards the checkout. They seemed so comfortable with each other. A team. He never saw me. I was just another shadow in the aisle. Seeing him living a normal, happy life should have been a wake-up call. It should have been the moment I realized I was on the wrong path. But I was too deep in my own delusion. My first thought wasn't, I was wrong. It was, he got lucky. She probably settled. My arrogance was like a fortress, even when faced with evidence that my entire worldview was flawed. I refused to surrender. I went home, drank the entire bottle of wine, and cried myself to sleep. The next few months are a blur of bad dates, dwindling online numbers, and increasing loneliness. I was now 32. The project of finding a husband was a catastrophic failure. I had followed all my own rules. I had aimed for the top, and I had ended up with nothing. The pressure was immense. My business, my identity, my future. Everything was on the line. I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for something to happen, for the perfect man to just walk into my life and validate all my choices. But he never came. Instead, what came was the night of the live stream. The night everything burned to the ground. It wasn't planned. It was a perfect storm of failure, alcohol, and despair. I had just come from another date. This one was with a wealth manager who checked his stock portfolio every 5 minutes and critiqued my business plan. He told me I should pivot to a subscription model for more consistent revenue. I walked out in the middle of his lecture on monetization. I went home, opened a bottle of whiskey. I'd graduated from wine and just sat there in the dark. I felt a tidal wave of self-pity wash over me. It wasn't fair. I was smart, successful, beautiful. I had done everything right. So, why was I so miserable? Why was I still alone? In a moment of drunken, terrible judgment, I decided to go live. I thought maybe connecting with my audience would make me feel better. I set up my camera. My lighting was a mess. My hair was a mess. I didn't care. I hit the go live button. The viewers started trickling in, surprised by the unscheduled stream. I started talking. At first, it was the usual stuff, ranting about the terrible state of modern dating. But then, something inside me snapped. The mask I had been wearing for years finally cracked and fell away, and what was underneath was ugly. You know what the problem is, I slurred? Looking directly into the camera, it's all of them. All men. I have done everything. I have built an empire. And for what? The rich ones are emotionally bankrupt narcissists who just want a trophy. They're all either married or they're damaged. Or they think being a woman with an opinion is a red flag. The chat was starting to get weird. People were asking if I was okay. I ignored them. I was on a roll. Where are the good men? I shouted, my voice cracking. Everyone says, be a high-value woman and you'll attract a high-value man. It's a lie. A total lie. And then came the tears. Big, ugly, mascara-streaked tears. I wasn't the powerful guru anymore. I was just a drunk, lonely woman crying on the internet. I'm so lonely. I sobbed. I just want someone to love me. Is that too much to ask? Why does everyone else get to be happy? What did I do wrong? I ranted and cried for 20 minutes. I blamed men. I blamed society. I blamed feminism for lying to me. I blamed everyone but myself. It was the most pathetic, humiliating moment of my life. and I broadcast it live to the world. I don't remember ending the stream. I just remember waking up the next morning on my couch, my head pounding, my phone buzzing like it was going to explode. I had a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. I knew, even before I looked, that I had ruined everything. The morning after the stream was a special kind of hell. My phone was a nuclear meltdown of notifications, texts from my few remaining friends, my family, my business manager. Social media was a dumpster fire. Number "See enameled down" was trending. The clip of me crying and slurring my words was everywhere. It was on Twitter, on Reddit, on YouTube. People had remixed it with sad music. They had turned my tear-streaked face into a meme. The comments were brutal. The dating guru who can't get a date. This is what happens when your standards are higher than your sanity. Karma for that guy she bullied on her stream years ago. Someone had found the old clip of me destroying Zev and put it side by side with my meltdown video. The contrast was devastating. There I was, so smooth and arrogant, and here I was now, a pathetic mess. It was the ultimate how it started versus how it's going. The professional fallout was immediate and catastrophic. My book publisher sent a terse email invoking the morals clause in my contract. My deal was canceled. My sponsors dropped me one by one. Their PR teams didn't want to be associated with my public implosion. My business manager called and told me, in no uncertain terms, that our professional relationship was over. The brand is toxic, Sienna. He said, there's no coming back from this. I tried to post an apology video. I filmed it a dozen times, but it always sounded hollow and self-serving. In the end, I just deleted all my social media accounts. I wanted to disappear. The financial collapse followed quickly. Without the sponsors and the book deal, my income evaporated overnight. I could no longer afford the rent on my high-rise apartment. I had to sell everything: the designer clothes, the expensive furniture, the high-tech streaming equipment. Each item I sold felt like a piece of my old identity being stripped away. I moved out of my beautiful apartment and into a small one-bedroom place in a neighborhood I used to make fun of. The silence was the same, but now it felt different. It wasn't the quiet of a palace. It was the quiet of a cell. I had no career, no brand, and very few friends. The ones who had stuck by me, the normal ones, tried to reach out, but I was too ashamed to face them. What could I say? Hey, remember all that advice I gave you that you ignored? Turns out you were right, and I was a delusional idiot who ruined her own life. So, I just ignored their calls and texts until they stopped coming. For the first time since college, I had to find a real job. My resume was basically online personality. It wasn't very useful in the real world. After weeks of searching, the only place that would hire me was a coffee shop. I, Sienna, the former CEO and dating guru, became a barista. The irony was so thick, I could taste it in the burnt coffee I served every day. I wore a baseball cap pulled down low, hoping no one would recognize me. But occasionally, they did. A young woman would stare at me for a moment too long while I took her order. Hey, are you that girl from the internet? I would just shake my head and say, you must have me confused with someone else. The humiliation was a constant low-grade fever. I was living the exact life I had taught my followers to avoid at all costs. I was average. I was struggling. I was invisible. My days became a monotonous routine. Wake up, go to work, serve coffee to people more successful than I was, come home, eat a cheap dinner, go to sleep. There was no glamour, no empowerment, no six-figure men. There was just the quiet, grinding reality of a life I had built out of my own hubris and failure. Months went by like this. The seasons changed, and I barely noticed. I was just surviving. The anger and bitterness I had felt for so long slowly started to fade, replaced by a profound emptiness. I had so much time to think, too much time, I thought about all the choices I had made. I thought about the advice I had given. I had told women that their worth was tied to the man they could attract. I had told them that a man's value was his bank account. I had preached a gospel of transactional relationships, of status and materialism, and in the end, I was its greatest victim. The moment of clarity, the real one, came on a rainy afternoon. I was on my break at the coffee shop, scrolling through my phone. I had created a new anonymous social media account just to feel connected to the world. The algorithm, in its infinite wisdom, suggested a profile for me. People you may know? It was him, Zev. My heart hammered in my chest. I don't know why I clicked on it. Maybe it was a form of self-punishment. His profile was public again. His profile picture was a family portrait. It was him. The pretty woman I'd seen him with in the grocery store, and a little girl with his same smile sitting on his shoulders. They were in the backyard of a simple, modest house. There was a swing set in the background. His old dog was lying in the grass nearby. He didn't look rich. He didn't look powerful. He just looked happy. Genuinely, profoundly happy. I scrolled through his photos, pictures of his daughter's birthday party, a video of him teaching her how to ride a bike, a picture of him and his wife on a date night at a local, inexpensive-looking restaurant. They were raising their glasses to the camera, both smiling. It was a whole life, a real, tangible, beautiful life, the kind of life I had mocked, the kind of life I had told millions of women was beneath them. And as I sat there in the back room of a coffee shop smelling of stale espresso, I finally understood I had been so wrong. So deeply, fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. I had spent years chasing a fantasy, a hollow, glittering prize that didn't exist. I thought value was about income and status and appearances, but I was looking at true value right there. On my phone screen, it was in the way he looked at his wife. It was in the joy on his face as he played with his daughter. It was in the building of a home, a family, a partnership. It was everything I had thrown away in my pursuit of more. I thought about the man he was when he wrote that comment on my stream. He had asked a simple, honest question about character and kindness, and I had torn him apart for it. I had used him as a prop to build my own fragile ego. I had tried to make him small so that I could feel big. But he wasn't small. He was a good man. A man of character. The kind of man who builds a happy life. And me, I was the one who was small. I was the one who was empty. A wave of shame so powerful it made me nauseous, washed over me. I had not only ruined my own life, but I had also potentially poisoned the minds of thousands of other women. How many of them had left good, kind men because of my advice? How many of them were now as lonely and miserable as I was? That was the heaviest burden of all. I closed the app. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the wall. The rain was streaking down the window pane. I didn't cry. I was past tears. There was just a quiet, devastating acceptance. I had lost. I had played a stupid game and lost in the most spectacular way possible. The greatest irony, the final, cruelest twist of the knife, was the last thought that popped into my head. He's probably never thought about me again since that day. I was a minor, unpleasant blip in his life story. But I will never, ever forget him. He was the man who had everything I said wasn't worth having. And he ended up having everything I ever truly wanted.